The sky over the blackened spires of Vorth Carrion no longer screamed. Once the heavens roared with magic. Crimson lightning danced through clouds of obsidian mist, and the wind carried whispers from forgotten gods. But now, the air hung still, like a breath held too long. The moons above flickered like dying candles. The great ley lines, once blazing with chaotic energy, now pulsed faintly like the veins of a sick animal. Within the halls of the onyx throne, the dark elves gathered, their faces tight with concealed panic. Their skin, once glowing with magical vitality, had begun to dull. Fingers that once conjured storms now trembled even under the weight of a goblet. Runes etched into their bones itched constantly, flaring with weak, sputtering sparks. Their power was failing, and with it, their grip on the realms. Their temples lay cracked, their blood forges rusted. The dragons they had once enslaved with binding spells now flew free and wild, melting citadels as they passed. The minor races once crushed under elven rule had begun to rise. Rebellions festered in the outer territories. Even the shadows, loyal for 10,000 years, had started to whisper doubts. The high priestess Thalzira stood alone before the fading mirror. In its cracked surface she did not see herself. She saw the empire dying. And yet, in the deepest crypts, beneath bones older than language, something stirred. A rumor. A name. Not elven, not ancient. Something human. Something profane. A force so chaotic, so illogical, so utterly uncontrollable, it could never be destroyed. The name burned itself into her mind. Florida Man. Her lips curled into a smile that hadn't touched her face in centuries. If order had failed them, perhaps chaos would save them. The vault was sealed in silence and madness. Beneath 100 locked doors, behind runes etched in forgotten tongues, lay the hall of unspoken knowledge. A place so steeped in cursed lore that even whispers avoided it. No elf had entered in millennia, not since the last war against the outer things. But now, guided by desperation and the creeping rot of failing power, Thalzira descended its obsidian steps alone. Her hands trembled as she passed skeletal guardians frozen in place, eyes still glowing with the memory of forbidden truths. The deeper she went, the more the air warped. Reality bent here, just slightly, enough to unsettle the stomach and twist the edges of the mind. At the chamber's heart, half buried in ash and dust, she found it. A scroll. Ancient parchment, wrapped in chains of rusted bronze. It pulsed with a heat not of flame, but of mania. The kind of energy that comes from roller coasters built by lunatics and choices made at 3 a.m., with no sleep and too much sugar. Her fingers hesitated, then unwrapped it. The words inside were jagged, erratic, sometimes written in blood, sometimes in glitter. They spoke of a being from the planet called Earth, a creature of unpredictable destruction, sometimes hero, sometimes menace. A force summoned not by intention, but by sheer human chaos. Florida Man. Tales followed. One had wrestled a hurricane naked, another had robbed a bank with a baby alligator. One built a rocket from beer kegs and aimed for the moon, just to see if it works. This was no ordinary human. This was a concept. A cosmic virus of illogic. Thalzira's eyes widened. Yes, this was it. Not a god. Something worse. Something useful. The summoning grounds had not seen such preparation in 10,000 years. Every altar was scrubbed clean with acid and starlight. The blood of extinct beasts boiled in golden cauldrons. Sacred drums pounded like war gods' heartbeats, echoing through the pillars of black stone that surrounded the ritual circle. The sky above cracked open as if peeking in, curious, wary. Thousands of dark elves gathered in ceremonial formation, their cloaks catching firelight, eyes glowing with anxious reverence. In the center stood Thalzira, arms outstretched, the forbidden scroll clutched in one hand, the other smeared with sacrificial ink. They chanted. Not in their tongue, but in broken phonetic mimicry of the earth dialects found in the scroll's margins. Words like "Yol" and "Hold my beer" floated into the void, twisted and ancient sounding through their sharp tongues. They poured essence from bottled chaos, crushed expired hot sauce packets into the flames, and cast in a radio they believed was a relic of power. The earth split. The sky trembled. For a moment, the veil between worlds thinned, just enough to let something through. Smoke filled the circle. Shapes moved. A roar of anticipation shook the crowd. And then, it cleared. Silence. At the center of the summoning circle sat a lizard. Small. Green. Very much alive. It blinked at them, lazily flicked its tongue, and on its head was a pink, glittery plastic crown that read, "Birthday Princess." Someone in the back whispered, "Is that it?" The High Warlord unsheathed his blade. "We were promised a god of madness," the lizard burped. The spell had not failed. But neither had it worked. And then, Thalzira collapsed to her knees, eyes wide, her voice hollow as she whispered, "It wasn't enough." Thalzira's body convulsed as ancient magic surged through her bones. The summoning circle still smoldered with heatless fire. The crowd stepped back as the High Priestess arched her spine, her hands clawing at the air. Her mouth opened, but it was not her voice that spoke. Something else spoke through her. Something old, something tired of being misunderstood. The words came out distorted, layered, as though 1,000 drunk spirits were arguing over the same sentence. Not one, not enough, never just one. Gasps echoed across the chamber. Her eyes rolled back, glowing with crackling yellow light as blood trickled from her nose. 43,804. She collapsed to the stone floor. The flames vanished, the wind died, and the small lizard at the center of the summoning circle wandered off, unfazed. Maiska. There was no movement. No whispers. The entire legion stood frozen in stunned silence. 43,804. Not coins. Not chants. Not runes. Sacrifices. They hadn't summoned a god. They'd tugged at the sleeve of something too big to arrive for anything less than absurd scale. Not a being, a force. A cosmic hurricane of absurdity and human chaos that required blood as an entrance fee. A commander finally found his voice. "That number is madness." Thalzira slowly stood, trembling but alive. "No, that number is Florida." She turned her eyes to the stars above, calculating quickly in her mind, the way only an immortal could. "We'll need more. Round it to 50,000. Just to be sure." The order echoed through the obsidian halls like a death knell, and so the elves prepared not to summon, but to unleash. Night fell quietly over the human colony of Red Cedar, a peaceful outpost nestled between the edge of the wildlands and the orbiting ruins of old-world satellites. Neon lamps flickered lazily in the town square. Farmers returned from their solar plows. Children laughed beneath bioluminescent trees, chasing holographic fireflies with sticky fingers and scratched knees. No one noticed the shimmer in the air, not at first. The dark elves didn't arrive with thunder or war horns. They arrived like a disease. Silent, swift, coordinated. Shadow portals opened between buildings, behind barns, inside homes. Black-cloaked figures stepped out of the rifts like nightmares dressed for a funeral. And then, the screaming started. Night-by-nutrition, they moved quickly. Stunning, binding, dragging. Men and women alike vanished in flashes of violet light. Some fought back. One man flung a kitchen chair and screamed about his property rights. Another tried to fend off an elf with a frozen turkey leg. A grandmother hurled slippers with terrifying accuracy. But resistance was meaningless. Within the hour, the colony was reduced to broken windows, dropped toys, and eerie silence. Massive crystal pods floated above the trees, each one pulsing faintly with the trapped soul of a human. Hundreds, thousands. The elves worked tirelessly, wordlessly. Precision kidnappers, relentless. Thalzira surveyed the scene from a raised platform, counting as the pods floated past. 47,982, she muttered. A warlock stepped forward. "There's another colony, only 2 ridges west." She nodded. "Get the rest. Round it to 50,000. We will not risk another misfire." The elves vanished into the trees again. By sunrise, the count was complete. 50,000 humans, screaming, dreaming or unconscious, packed tightly into soul forges. The sacrifice was ready, and the realm held its breath for what was about to arrive. The sky bled fire. Above the summoning crater, the air pulsed with a rhythm, not born of drums, but of something deeper, the beat of a chaotic force demanding attention. 50,000 containment pods floated in a perfect spiral, orbiting the altar like slow-moving moons. Each one shimmered with soul light, humming softly, like a lullaby whispered from a madhouse. Les Marcheurs. This was no ritual. This was a gamble with reality itself. Les Marcheurs. The summoners stood in 3 concentric circles, chanting in unison, their voices fused into a discordant harmony that fractured the stone beneath their feet. The ground burned with fresh sigils, crude, uneven, some scrawled in ketchup and glitter, as dictated by the scroll's final page. At the center of it all, Falzira raised the scroll of Florida. She did not read it, she screamed it. Every word, every syllable, mangled human phrases from forgotten Florida police reports and internet archives, became an invocation of cosmic chaos. Her voice broke, then deepened, then turned into a nasally honk as magic twisted through her lungs. The wind howled, the moon spun in reverse. The altar split open like an egg dropped from heaven, and then, boom, a deafening crack. Light exploded from the center. Several elves were thrown backward, tumbling like broken dolls. Energy surged through the valley, warping space, turning trees into dancing light poles and shattering the barrier between sense and nonsense. When the smoke finally began to clear, something stood in the circle. Not a god, not a demon, just a man, barefoot, wearing American flag swim trunks and a Hawaiian shirt stained with hot sauce. On his head was a backward trucker cap. In one hand, he clutched a raccoon. In the other, a half-eaten burrito wrapped in a gas station receipt. He looked around, eyes hidden behind scratched sunglasses. Then he said, "Y'all got fireworks or what?" And the elves froze. They had summoned Florida Man. Florida Man squinted into the magic-fueled skyline like a tourist who had accidentally wandered into a Renaissance festival held on an alien planet. He scratched his chest absently, yawned, then popped the rest of his burrito into his mouth. It wasn't clear where he pulled the next item from. Maybe a pocket, maybe a dimensional fold in his swim trunks, but suddenly, he was holding a large sweating bottle of Mountain Dew. He took a long sip and sighed. Damn, thought I was at a tailgate party. Around him, the most powerful dark elves in existence stood frozen, unsure whether to attack, bow, or run. The air itself seemed to hesitate. One warlock began charging a spell but stopped halfway, when Florida Man made eye contact and pointed finger guns at him. "Pew pew," he said casually. The warlock fainted. Florida Man walked up to the towering obsidian statue at the edge of the altar, a depiction of Thren Volak, the elven god of forbidden knowledge and eternal judgment, and studied it for a moment. Then, with a casual shrug, he fished a permanent marker from the waistband of his trunks and gave the god googly eyes, a handlebar mustache, and a giant smiley face on the chest. "There, fixed your vibe." The elves gasped. The statue began to glow. Falzira's voice trembled. "He's altering sacred relics without spell work." Florida Man turned to her, chewing noisily on something he hadn't been holding moments ago. "Y'all got a Waffle House here, or is that a bring-your-own situation?" He wandered off without waiting for a response, pausing only to high-five a guard, who promptly dropped his weapon, broke into a cold sweat and whispered, "I have seen the void." As Florida Man strolled into the elven capital, completely unaware he had just become the most dangerous being in their history, the world itself started to bend around him. By the time Florida Man reached the gates of the capital city, the guards had already lowered their spears and opened the way, not out of obedience, but confusion. What do you do when the being you summoned to save your dying world climbs atop your sacred water fountain, declares it a natural hot tub, and then cannonballs into it with a holler of YEEHAW? The answer, it seemed, was nothing. Elves watched from balconies and temples, stunned. Some believed he was an omen, others, a trickster god. A few believed he was a test. All agreed on one thing: he was not to be interfered with. In the royal archives, scribes and scholars pored over the scrolls, trying to reconcile his absurd behavior with the ancient prophecies. One passage began to take on new meaning. He shall arrive barefoot, heralded by raccoons. He shall mock the sacred, break the divine, and feed on forbidden sources. Another line, once dismissed as corrupted nonsense, now rang with clarity: he will insult the gods, and the gods will laugh. Across the city, a priest kneeled before a mural that now depicted Florida Man holding a taco in one hand and a flaming chicken leg in the other. It had not been painted. It had simply appeared. That night, whispers began to spread. He fixed the statue with no magic. He rides no mount, yet he goes where he pleases. He asked the oracle if she wanted to shotgun a beer, and she said yes. Thalzira stood atop the central spire, watching the being they had summoned turn their structured world into a sandbox of absurdity, and not through destruction, but through irreverence. And yet, somehow, magic surged again. Power returned. Laughter echoed in the streets, and so the question grew like a sickness in the minds of her people. Was this madness divine? They had summoned him, but it was the humans who understood him. Florida Man shot through the breach, riding a neon green four-wheeler, screaming YEEHAW, while holding a half-eaten corn dog like a sword. The vehicle screeched across the summoning floor, launching off a levitation rune and doing a full barrel roll in the air. The archmages screamed in terror as Florida Man flew straight into the core of the spell. He landed in the center of the doom spell, barefoot, mid-bite. "You'll do in a magic show." The spell collapsed. The orb imploded. Time uncoiled. The runes turned into smiley faces and fried chicken bones. The archmages? Gone. Just gone. In their place sat a single plastic lawn chair and a six-pack of off-brand cola. Florida Man stood up, adjusted his sunglasses, and walked out whistling "Sweet Home Alabama." Later that night, lightning wrote a message across the sky: "Do not attempt to delete Florida Man." Even the universe had given up. The doom spell had done more than fail. It had punched a hole in reality. Where once there was a protective veil between realms, between this world and the deeper multiverse, now there was only a swirling rift. It pulsed with instability, leaking sparks, smells of sunscreen, and bass-heavy country trap music. The first ripple came quietly. A figure stumbled through the rift, coughing on barbecue smoke. He wore medieval armor made entirely from beer cans, wielded a leaf blower strapped to a broomstick, and screamed. "I have come from the age of Renaissance fairs and DUI court." The elves stared. Then came another. This one had a cybernetic arm, glowing red eyes, and a pet squirrel wearing a GoPro. He tossed a glitter bomb into the air and shouted, "Cyberpunk Tallahassee sends its regards." Then another, and another. Within minutes, the courtyard of the shattered Grand Cradle was flooded with variant Florida men from across timelines and dimensions. Cowboy versions, caveman versions, astronaut versions, and at least one version made entirely of duct tape, chewing gum, and spite. Each one louder, weirder, and less predictable than the last. Florida Man Prime, the original, just stood there, sipping from a coconut that somehow had a bendy straw, watching them arrive like an uncle proud of his extended family showing up late to a backyard wedding. Dave from Tampa walked up beside him, mouth open. "Is that you?" Florida Man grinned. "That's me from the universe where I got bit by a radioactive gator and never paid my child support." Across the plaza, the Florida men had already begun racing hoverboats around sacred obelisks. One set up a taco stand on a dragon's back. Another climbed the elven clock tower, declared himself time sheriff, and rewound it 6 hours just for fun. The elves watched, slack-jawed. "This wasn't a summoning," one whispered. "It was an invasion." Thalzira stepped into the madness, her robes torn, her eyes wide with revelation. "No," she said. "It's a Floridaverse breach. The infection is now dimensional." Above them, the rift widened even further, and across countless stars, the chaos began to spread. Order died quietly. Not with screams or war, but with music, laughter, and the smell of hot dogs sizzling on repurposed spellforges. By the end of the week, the elven realm was unrecognizable. Where once stood high towers etched with ancient runes, now hung strings of neon lights and banners that read, "Welcome to the Chaos Carnival." The capital city had been renamed, not through any vote, decree, or magical referendum. Someone simply climbed the spire of eternity, spray-painted Floribama across its face, and no one stopped them. The name stuck. The transformation was complete. The Grand Library was now a drive-through tattoo parlor. The Temple of Echoes hosted nightly monster truck battles. The volcano that once housed the divine fire elemental now sold margaritas out of a walk-up window. Elves walked around dazed, their elegant robes stained with ketchup and glitter. Some resisted at first, others embraced it. All were changed. Even the ley lines, the magical arteries of the world, began to pulse with unfamiliar rhythms. They no longer whispered in Elvish. They now hummed the tune of Sweet Caroline, every evening at sunset. Valzira wandered the streets in silence, watching her people line up for gator taming contests and backyard wrestling on enchanted trampolines. She found herself standing beneath a massive new statue, 20 feet tall, carved from moonstone and aluminum cans, depicting Florida Man in his full chaotic glory, raccoon on shoulder, flip-flop raised high like a holy weapon. At the base, an inscription read, "Where reason ends, the party begins." Magic surged in the air once again, stronger than ever, but wild, untamed. Refusing to obey the old commands, the Bixurgic Surgeha. This was no longer an empire. This was Floribama, sovereign realm of chaos, ruled by absurdity, fueled by barbecue, and protected by an ever-growing army of unpredictable legends from across the multiverse. And the universe had taken notice. Deep within the crumbling temple of Kael Mor, where prophecy had once been etched into stone with sacred daggers, the walls began to change. No spell was cast. No ritual invoked. It simply happened, like graffiti appearing in a locked room. The murals, once majestic depictions of ancient elven history, cosmic wars and fated salvation, began to warp, faces twisted into cartoons. Golden halos were replaced by beer helmets. One portrait of a wise archmage now bore a trucker hat and mirrored sunglasses. Another, once showing a divine pact between stars, had a crudely painted raccoon in the center, giving a thumbs up. The head scribe entered the chamber and screamed. Who desecrated the holy prophecies? But as he stepped closer, the runes shimmered, words shifted, meanings bent. The elvish script morphed into something strange, crude earth text, flashing in glowing memes across the sacred stone. He who arrives barefoot shall not walk, he shall stomp. When the sacred scroll is deep fried, the truth will be revealed. Hold my beer, for I shall show you miracles. A whisper moved through the air, the stone vibrated, magic surged, the scribe collapsed to his knees, trembling. Not out of fear, but reverence. Somehow, the walls were still sacred, just rewritten. Soon, others arrived, pilgrims, converts, even some of the remaining council. They gathered beneath the glowing memes, taking notes, murmuring interpretations, and posting their own additions. A small gnome with a shaky brush added a poorly drawn gator surfing a lightning bolt. Instead of condemnation, the wall glowed brighter. Prophecy had not been erased. It had been updated. Proscia's Gall Dern. Now the sacred truth was viral, shareable, alive. And in the center of it all, burned into the heart of the temple, in glowing script no elf could unsee, was a single line of divine chaos. Florida Man is inevitable. The rift pulsed again. Unlike the earlier surges, which had delivered gator-riding cowboys and duct-tape astronauts, this disturbance felt colder, sharper. The kind of energy that filed complaints before it entered the room. It began with a flickering tremor in the skies over Floribama. The clouds split with a hiss. The music in the air distorted. Somewhere, a margarita machine exploded. Calm. From the breach, A single figure descended slowly on a hover platform, shaped like a customer service desk. She wore tactical yoga pants, a visor of judgment, and an apron embroidered with "Manager of Reality." In her left hand, she held a perfectly organized binder of divine policy violations. In her right, a blade forged from expired coupons and the passive-aggressive fury of 10 million review sections. She was Karen Prime, and she was angry. As the elven remnants scattered, even the Florida men paused, mid-beer pong match, sensing a shift in the energy. The raccoons hissed and vanished into the sewers. An entire taco stand imploded from sheer disapproval. Karen Prime touched down in the heart of Floribama. Her voice boomed with bureaucratic rage. This dimension is in violation of 84,293 codes across 17 galactic ordinances. There are fireworks without permits, deep-fried forbidden artifacts, unauthorized emotional support raccoons, and not a single universal return policy. She summoned her army. A fleet of lesser Karens from alternate timelines, all marching in tight formation with name tags and laminated complaint forms. They advanced on the city, sniffing out joy, targeting unlicensed chaos, and demanding to speak with higher powers. One elf, desperate, ran forward holding a glowing hot dog like an offering. Karen vaporized him with a single flash from her receipt of doom. Florida Man Prime stepped forward from a crowd of confused but loyal followers. He wore a cape made of lawn chairs and held a grill spatula like a scepter. He stared her down. "Lady, you must be lost. This ain't the Homeowners Association. This is Floribama." She narrowed her eyes behind oversized sunglasses. "And I am here to shut it down." And so began the Great Karen War. The city braced for war. But not just any war, a battle between the two most unpredictable forces the multiverse had ever known: Florida Man, chaos incarnate, and Karen Prime, the weaponized embodiment of control. The arena was chosen instinctively, the Glitter Dome, a stadium formed naturally from the shattered remains of a wizard's disco experiment. Its floor shimmered with sequins, oil, and dried cheese dust. Its crowd was already drunk. Raccoons manned the snack booths. Hover drones circled overhead. A neon sign crackled to life. Main event: Florida Man vs. Karen Prime. No refunds. Karen Prime floated into the center of the dome, clipboard in hand, her visor pulsing red. "I'm invoking Clause 117B. Absolute revocation of nonsense." Florida Man rolled in on a jet-powered shopping cart, 1 foot up, chugging a can of gas station energy drink. A squirrel clung to his shoulder, wearing a tiny cape. "Clause this," he muttered, and pulled a firework out of nowhere, lighting it with his bare thumb. It exploded into the sky, releasing glitter, barbecue smoke, and 3 live chickens. The battle began. Karen Prime unleashed a flurry of subpoenas sharpened into throwing stars. Florida Man dodged by moonwalking into a somersault, then blocked a wave of weaponized Yelp reviews with a shield made from a satellite dish and duct tape. He conjured a vortex of loud sighs and disappointed glances. He countered with a spontaneous monster truck rally that crushed the platform of logic beneath her. The audience roared. The sky trembled. Elves wept as their cultural foundations were repurposed into a tailgating stage. Karen Prime screamed, "This realm violates every cosmic policy." Florida Man somersaulted onto a flaming sofa, flipped backward, and grinned. "Good. That means we're doing it right." As their duel peaked, the multiverse shuddered. Dimensions wobbled. A planet somewhere evolved sentience, just to shout, "Yeehaw!" And in that moment, amid fire, glitter, and weaponized petty rage, it became clear. This wasn't just about one man versus one Karen. This was the collision of 2 primal forces, one that demanded order, and one that refused to wear shoes. The battle reached its absurd climax in a rain of coupon confetti and gator surfing fireworks. Karen Prime hovered in midair, her clipboard cracked, her hair frizzed by ozone and high emotion. Across from her, Florida Man stood shirtless on top of a flipped golf cart, sweat-covered and glowing like a war god who had just finished a chili cook-off. They stared at each other, both panting, both smoke-ringed. The glitter dome lay in ruins. The sky was purple. Somewhere, someone was still playing the banjo. And then it happened. Lobby. A hush fell over the crowd as Florida Man reached slowly into his cargo shorts. Time itself slowed. Lobby, 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 arati insamala anlan. Was it another weapon? Lobby, 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 a joke. Lobby, a raccoon in a can. Lemon. Lobby, 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 insaman. It was a coupon. A faded, slightly greasy, slightly torn, laminated coupon that read, 1 free Chili's appetizer, no expiration. He held it out like a holy relic. Karen Prime narrowed her eyes. I haven't been to Chili's since the great buffet ban of Sector 12. She took it. The air rippled. Somewhere in the multiverse, a Chili's neon sign turned back on, and just like that, her visor dimmed, her clipboard evaporated into glitter dust. Her army of minor Karens paused, blinked, and slowly turned to browse margarita menus and novelty shirts at the nearest Gator gift shop. She stepped down from her hover desk, heels clicking on broken tile. Perhaps I've been a little too intense. Florida Man nodded and handed her a cold beer. Ain't nothing wrong with enforcing rules, ma'am, long as you know when to ignore 'em. They clinked bottles. In that moment, law and chaos toasted to a temporary truce. And thus, the Barbecue Treaty of Floribama was signed. Not on paper, but on the back of a grilled cheese sandwich. The treaty was sealed, the glitter settled. And for the first time in the realm of Floribama, there was peace. Sort of. The kind of peace where fireworks never stopped. Raccoons paid taxes in bottle caps, and someone legally married a barbecue smoker. But peace, nonetheless. Florida Man stood at the highest point of the city, atop the spinning rooftop of the Taco Bell Cathedral, overlooking his kingdom. The air buzzed with music, laughter, and the occasional bass drop from a Gator-powered DJ booth. He looked tired, not from the battle, but from the weight of destiny. Dave from Tampa approached him, still holding the ceremonial lawn chair staff. You all right, brother? Florida Man didn't answer right away. He took a long sip from a jug labeled, definitely not moonshine, then looked up at the swirling rift in the sky. Still flickering with possibility, danger, and beer-fueled opportunity. I ain't built to settle, Dave, he said quietly. Not forever. Dave nodded, understanding. Where you headed? Florida Man smiled. Up. The next day, the entire city gathered to witness the impossible. Using spare parts from airboats, a dragon's liver, 17 empty kegs, a deep fryer, and one slightly cursed engine, the Florida men built a rocket. One so loud and questionably engineered, it required prayers, beer, and a waiver to stand within 100 feet. Florida Man climbed aboard in silence, wearing flip-flops, a cape made from tablecloths, and a freshly drawn tattoo of a gator holding a lightning bolt. Karen Prime, now relaxed in cargo shorts, saluted him. You ever come back? She said. He winked. Bring ribs. Engines roared. The rocket blasted into the sky, leaving behind a trail of glitter, smoke, and Freebird blaring from external speakers. As he pierced the rift above, tearing into higher dimensions and farther chaos, one final message echoed through the realms. Catch me on Jupiter, losers! And, just like that, he was gone, but not forgotten. Back on Earth, everything had gone quiet. The last transmission from the Floribama colony had been mostly static, punctuated by banjo music, a scream, someone yelling about freedom tacos, and what sounded like a raccoon arguing with a priest. Then, silence. The United Nations held an emergency broadcast. The Secretary General, flanked by scientists, diplomats, and one man wearing a tinfoil hat who claimed to be Florida Man's cousin, stared into the camera. His voice was steady, but hollow. We sent colonists to find peace, to expand humanity's reach. What we got was him. The screen behind him flashed clips. A man launching a fireworks display from a space gator. Elves in trucker hats doing karaoke. Karen Prime opening a boutique that sold revenge-themed candles. A raccoon-led seminar titled, "Embrace the Weird, You're in a Florida." The Secretary General continued. We are officially designating the Floribama Zone as a Class 10 chaotic entity field. All interdimensional travel to or from it is strongly discouraged. He paused. If you or someone you know begins exhibiting symptoms such as spontaneous line dancing, the desire to deep-fry gemstones, or speaking in legendary quotes that begin with, "So I was holding my beer when," please report to the nearest reality stabilization unit. Then, the screen glitched. A raccoon appeared, saluted, and disappeared again. The secretary sighed, removed his tie and muttered, "God help us. They taught the squirrels how to drive." The feed cut out. Across Earth, people didn't know whether to panic or throw a party, because while humanity had spread across the stars with machines and science, now the galaxy knew the truth. Lavatiti Kanbalayan. The most powerful force we ever created wore no shoes, ignored every warning sign, and left behind only wreckage and laughter. Florida Man was out there, and he was ascending. Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell. Stars were born and burned out. Galaxies merged, and time itself frayed around the edges like an old bar napkin. But in taverns on asteroid belts, in smoky bunkers beneath crystal moons, and around digital campfires broadcast into 10,000 dimensions, the stories never stopped. He once rode a supernova bareback while drinking expired soda. He out-wrestled a thunder god using only a garden hose and one good arm. He challenged entropy to a beer pong tournament, and won. The name was whispered with awe, confusion, and just a hint of barbecue sauce. Florida Man. Some said he was still out there, drifting between dimensions on a solar-powered fishing boat, raccoon crew at his side. Others believed he had become part of the very fabric of chaos, now living in the in-between places, inside roadside diners, behind fireworks, warehouses, and occasionally inside microwave burritos. In the Temple of Infinite Stories, a cathedral built by ancient AI to archive all known myths, his statue stood beside gods, kings, and monsters. He wore his usual shorts. His sunglasses glinted eternally. One foot rested on a six-pack. His right hand held the sacred artifact, a half-eaten burrito. His left offered a raised flip-flop to the sky. The plaque beneath read, "Humanity sent diplomats, scientists, soldiers, but in the end, they feared the barefoot one." Every so often, a ripple would pass through space, a soft yeehaw riding on solar wind, and when it did, people locked their doors, or they opened them wide. Because when Florida Man arrives, he doesn't ask permission. He just crashes the universe's party, sets up a slip-and-slide on the fabric of reality, and leaves behind only chaos, gator tracks, and a legend that refuses to die.